Welcome to TTG's latest face-to-face interview. Today I'm joined by Bruce Poon Tip, who is an author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, but many of you will know him better as the founder of G Adventures and not-for-profit Planetera Foundation. So I'm here today to speak about Bruce's new instabook. Do you want to describe what that is, Bruce?
Well, what is it? I mean, it's something I guess we created with, which is the book that was written in the moment and is relevant for a certain period of time. Because of what's going on and the complete, the escalation and what's happened in the travel industry. I was debating what our thoughts are on it, and people were asking us to write something about what our thoughts are on it. Lots of interviews like this, and I just started writing and realized that there was not a full book but a short book, an instabook, about our thoughts of the opportunities that once we got over all the difficult decisions that this pandemic has brought upon the travel industry, where are the opportunities for us as an industry? And as I started waxing on about that, it just turned out to be, a bit longer. And so we decided we would publish it as a free download.
Brilliant. And it's called Unlearn, the Year the Earth Stood Still, which is a very impactful title. You describe it at the end as a love letter to all travelers.
Well, that's how it started. That's how I started to write it. How it actually came up is people were asking me to put out, I wrote a couple times. It was the situation was escalating so quickly, and people within my company were asking me, we got to put out a letter. And every time I put something out, I thought it was very insincere.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like every other letter that people were getting from their, favorite internet shopping of how, well, we're going to be stronger. We'll get through this together. All this kind of, talking points. Mine sounded just the same because what was really happening is no one really knew what was going to happen, and we were all just trying to send out, positive vibes when we really didn't know where we were going to land. And I felt the insincerity of that when I wrote something, and when I woke up the next morning, it was already irrelevant because things had shifted so quickly.
What would you say are the sort of main tenets of the book? You say that you think that traveller behaviour and desires might change as a result of lockdown and the coronavirus pandemic. But do you genuinely believe that, consumer desires will change? And if so, in what way and why?
I think there's two levels of that. I do think, it's my hope. First of all, I don't know. I don't think any of us can definitively say anything or anyone will change or for how long. But, one thing that this has shown us as a globe is that how connected we are, how connected the world is. The way it's kind of detailing how this spreads so quickly to the farthest corners of the earth. I've got to think that people think differently, or hopefully people think differently about how connected the world is. And with that, I think the landscape of tourism is going to change, because I think a lot of the older demographic, or, people that are going to be, that aren't going to be willing to go back into crowded spaces, locked spaces like, cruise ships or compound resorts, those kind of things. I think it'll just change the landscape, because people will still want to travel, but hopefully they'll want to travel differently and also better. And that actually serves communities and serves the planet better. So something like this, when travel kind of completely stops, which no one could have ever anticipated or ever thought in their wildest dreams that the globe could just shut down like it has. You hope that there's a reflective moment that we look back and say, we can do things better. We have an opportunity to reinvent.
Mm-hmm.
We are all at ground zero in the travel industry right now. We are the world's largest, startup.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have that startup opportunity, what would we envision as an industry is our greatest opportunities to come back? And why fight to get back to normal when we have such a fantastic opportunity to become a transformative industry as opposed to just selling capacity?
Yeah. Do you think, from your experience as a travel business leader, do you think there is enough will out there from other travel businesses
I think it's growing. I think there's more, and I think it's growing. And I've always said that any change is good change. I don't like being specifically critical about any sector, even though it might appear that I am sometimes picking on different industries. I look, I really believe that in all industries, there's companies that do things better than others.
Hmm.
When you even look at, luxury hotels, and you look at, the cruise industries, there's some companies that are willing to embrace things. There's some companies that actually look at gray water and trash compacting, and there's some water companies that are still dumping in the ocean. So there are levels in which people, the companies in which, look at things, and the consumer is getting more aware of that. And it's the consumer that ultimately, they have the power and that privilege and the power of buying, that creates those decisions within, us as companies. And so I do think it's growing. I do think there's more people. I do think people are changing how they live at home, and they're matching their values. And there's a tipping point where people want to match those values at home. And we're on the extreme end of that, because we've always been there. But it's great to me, and we should all celebrate in all businesses, let alone just travel, where companies are wanting to do more. However we got them there, they're there, and they know they want to do something. And maybe this pandemic and the positive thing that comes out of the earth shutting down is that people have the opportunity to rethink what we're going to look like on the other side. Travel is it's a privilege that we have, and it's not a right. And people have to understand the privilege they have to be able to travel. And there are destructive and non-destructive ways in which you can do it. Of course, you can never have a zero footprint. I mean, as many people want to profess that they want to do things to create no impact. That's almost impossible. But there certainly is, the benefits outweigh the negatives, most certainly. And there's just better ways in which we can do it. I mean, our impact with very small groups and the size of our business is a niche player compared to what people are willing to accept to throw their values out of the window to go on a more mainstream travel where, where there's obvious destruction, and you're willing to suspend your beliefs or your values just because you're in another country. I think that's the tipping point that we're facing within the industry, that people are starting to match their values with their holiday time, and that's where we've been for 30 years, and we've grown exceptionally over the last 10 or 15, because the mind of the consumer has changed.
You actually kind of list in defined chapters, measures that you think that travelers can take. As one of them, I know, was talking about kind of traveling beyond. So traveling beyond the destinations perhaps that you would usually explore, but also within places that you want to return to, maybe just thinking about going to slightly, less traveled areas of that place. What are some of the other ways in which travelers themselves can kind of change, their behavior in that way?
I think the unfortunate thing, in the direction the industry was going, prior to this, and is going, is how the destination has become irrelevant to people. As more and more people kind of focus on amenities, like, the way, as tour operators, we kind of push amenities to give people all the comforts of home, so they don't feel like they've left home. And people are wanting bigger and bigger, crowds of people, so they have more amenities, so more choices and more restaurants, more shows and Broadway entertainment, or indoor surfing or zip lining or whatever it is that attract people. The destination becomes irrelevant at some point. And I think it's the opposite of what travel should be. And hopefully, by the travel industry just coming to a full stop here, more and more people will kind of look and maybe change the way they look at travel and be more connected to destinations.
You also mentioned about how infrastructure obviously builds up around demand. So whilst there's a tipping point, I suppose, that you allude to, that places that have too many visitors, the infrastructure develops and people then want to come back because they were treated, how they wanted to be. But also at the other end of the scale, if people start visiting a certain destination like Bolivia or one of the lesser traveled to places, then, they should start growing, hopefully quite organically.
And so this has always been my argument about this the buzzword over tourism that's gone around, because over tourism really focuses around, like, as I said, Venice, Machu Picchu, and these places where massive amounts of tourists kind of all come together. And it's not really defined. It's just really kind of a lot of hype around destruction. But those destinations are used to having tens of millions of people visited every year, and they're almost and it's not even travel anymore. It's like an amusement park. You're paying an entry fee. You're lining up to get into things like the pyramids of Egypt, and it's the same experience as going to Disneyland. When it comes to over tourism in more remote areas, 100 people might be considered over tourism to a fragile community. The
Mm-hmm.
idea of a regular group coming every week with 20 people, where it changes their cultural behavior because people are spending money or going to a place, having a cultural impact. That is should equally be considered over tourism as well. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all of those things will come out as people, open and expand their mind to the potential of travel and the opportunities of travel. But at the same time, have the mindset that we want to preserve not only our most iconic destinations, but some of our remote communities and people that also some of the most in need communities around the world that can benefit from travel,
Mm-hmm.
and people deciding they want to go on holiday and traveling to some of the poorest countries in the world.
Mm-hmm. Sort of away from tourism, actually, an interesting point you made as well was to do with the idea that the more traveled the world, the more it breaks down barriers, and also kind of, for want of a less strong phrase, kind of holds countries to account. You can't get away with too much if you've got hordes of travelers coming through, which in itself is, I suppose, a positive outcome.
You really read my book.
I
You
really
read
read the book.
my book. I am so excited about this.
I only knew about this interview yesterday, and I just jumped straight on it.
Yeah, well, luckily it's an Instabook. Luckily it's short, but no, you don't know how many times I'm in an interview and I look across and realize I don't think they've read this book. So thank you. I'll
No
just say thank
problem.
you for actually reading it.
Yeah,
But yeah, that is a strong part of the message on the other side of travel, outside of the positive impact just on creating jobs, and it's the overall kind of path to peace as a planet. If people got to know other communities and other cultures, I have this very romantic view of how travel breaks down barriers, and a lot of war and religious kind of persecution that goes on in the world might not exist if people just understood each other better and actually went and understood how other families and people and how religions are all connected to loving thy neighbor and being good at the heart of your existence, and that's what binds us together.
Within the book, there's a really handy page where you sort of list a bit of a starter list of destinations that perhaps aren't traveled to as much, and that might be suffering very acutely as a result of the current crisis.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Was that just from your own experiences and travels, or places you haven't been to, or the
No,
news?
no. It's funny that you picked up on that because so many people have actually mentioned it who've just kind of initially kind of read the book, because it really is just off the top of my head. There's always these lists that come out. These lists that drive clicks all over the internet of the least visited places and the most visited places, and we have the issue of over tourism, and you all see the crowds in Venice. So I mean, it wasn't a definitive list, and certainly wasn't based around any kind of science or data, but it was just an example of the amount of beautiful countries that are out there for people to see. And if we aren't just all kind of collecting at these iconic kind of tourist attractions, there's a whole beautiful world out there that's completely unexplored, that offers so much for travelers. And that was just kind of an example of maybe places that people might think about.
You as an individual and your organizations focus most on the kind of community aspect of sustainability. I know you said you don't even like that phrase, self-sustainability, but I suppose you'd probably be happier if down the line overall, travel in itself was less impactful on the environment. I mean, are you hopeful of any kind of developments in flying? I know obviously you guys don't really sell flights, but I mean, are you hopeful that industry might develop, and the big hotels and the cruise lines might develop, so that as a whole collective we're making less of an impact on the environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other. I mean, just because we don't sell flights doesn't mean we can't care about it, because we expect people to fly to get to our destination. So it's disingenuous for any kind of company saying, well, we don't sell flights, but we want you to get somewhere by flight, or we don't offset those flights because we just do our tours here. You just offset here, but unless we make investments in teleportation, flights are going to exist for the foreseeable future. Of course, there's a race, and there's lots of money being put into how that can be done better, and whether it's electric planes, whether it's fossil fuel, some kind of fuel that takes us to being dependent on fossil fuels. And then I think the most interesting thing that's happening at the moment in research, and I know it's actually being done at the moment in the research, is carbon capture. The idea that planes can capture their own carbon and dissipate it before it hits the environment. So all of these things are ongoing, and so it is the hope that we can do things better. But with but it's very important to note, though, tourism as an industry drives so little of the reason why there's flights created. I mean, the global network of flights is created for business, right? It's business for business networks to Hong Kong, to London, to New York, to all of these cities. So the actual percentage of flights that are just for tourism, which are basically the charter flights that take people just for tourists, it's actually a small part of flights that exist in the world. So the network of flights that exists supports our global economy. It supports global business and trade, which we need as a business. And so I also do feel sometimes that leisure travel is sometimes highlighted too much in terms of being criticized or shamed for travel, when it really is part of our global network. We have to think of better ways to which to do it, as opposed to flight shaming leisure travelers who are at the back of the bus. I mean, the business travel is set up for our global economy. Unless we're prepared to completely relook at that, our economy would collapse if flights didn't exist, which we're seeing actually right now. Global trade and the network of flights is supported that. It's a very small percentage that's actually flights that are actually in the air exclusively for tourism.
Your message would be that it's sort of separate to flying. Once you're in the destination, it's just working as hard as possible as a traveler, knowing your kind of responsibility to try and sorry, I keep talking about your book, but that's what we're here for. Sort of minimizing leakage,
Yeah.
retaining as much investment in the area as you can. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your Ripple score for anybody who doesn't know about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's our Ripple score is something we created. It was a very painful kind of process of an idea of how we wanted to show our customers how much of their money was being spent and kept locally when they booked a tour with us. So we work with external to come up with a matrix using external partners to come up with how we can survey all of our suppliers, transportation, hotel, accommodations, everything, about what about local ownership, hiring local people within the region, and to show that when you book a trip with G Ventures, that a percentage or a good percentage or what percentage of that money actually of the money used to run your trip, how much stays in the local economy, to get people to become more conscious. I mean, it was a labor of love and took us like 5 years to actually pull it off, and it changed us, everything that we do as a company in terms of how we do buying, how we look at our partners, and what makes expanding the spectrum of what's successful in a partner for us, not just a profitable relationship or a price point or amenities or quality of hotel, but it was adding into that the local component. So that kind of stuff is critical to us. It's our whole business model, and we created Ripple Score really in a way to police ourselves, because we have buyers all over the world in 100 countries always buying hotels, but we still motivate people because we have to actually set our prices based on a competitive industry. So we don't want price point to be the main driver. And if there's two places now but one's foreign owned and one is not, there's a chance on how we gauge those partners to work with in expanding that spectrum of a successful partner to include people who hire locally, their management's local, diversity within that group, and as well ownership being local. And then just offering that information to customers to make informed decisions.
Yeah. And would you say that even for corporate travelers or people traveling outside of G Adventures, are there any ways, quite simple ways you can just ensure that you're trying to put as much money back into the economy as possible? I suppose you can look up the hotel, you can try and buy things locally, get off the beaten track.
That information is so readily and easily available and accessible. You just have to think about it. You just have to ask questions. You just have to think for a moment when you have. I know it's easy because it's made easy for you to sometimes book a less local or responsible or sustainable option. It's in front of all of us as consumers, but we just have to be more conscious of our consuming, and we have to understand the power we have, the power and privilege we have as consumers who have the opportunity to buy, travel, and go shopping, as opposed to making the quick, most cost-effective or cheapest option, or selfishly that fits our dates or our like just look at all different things and just ask questions. It's all there. I mean, it's people just have to be aware.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big shift. I mean, I don't think you have to go digging and spend hours investigating. You just have to ask questions, and people should be able to answer them. Or we have the world of information in our pockets these days on smartphones, so it's quite easy to read reviews and blogs and posts and user-generated content on these things as well, and you'll get the information you need.
I've actually seen it firsthand how do tourism can be such a force for good in specific locations. Has there been much you've been able to do to kind of support your extended network during this crisis? I know it's a really difficult time, and difficult decisions will have to be made, but
yeah, I mean, that's super important. Yeah, we have. I mean, there's levels of support that we've offered. First of all, to our CEOs, and we're actually talking about a couple, like we're able to, when the immediate kind of impact and how it escalated so quickly with COVID-19, we made decisions with how we put our CEOs onto contract as opposed to being employed, because we didn't have any passengers anymore, and we put some programs in place for bonuses. Some of our porters, our trail porters, who we recently gave money to 380 families that are out of work, and giving them some support during this time. We're looking at presently, because we've just gotten over the most difficult decisions at GE, and now we're looking forward on what we can do. We put together a Planetara fund, which has been giving grants to a lot of the communities that are having problems, just with basic necessities. If you go to the Planetara actually Instagram or Facebook page, you'll see amazing grants that we're kind of issuing through the donations and and also money that we have within Planetara that we're giving to our projects. And we're also starting a CEO relief fund, which we're doing, dollar matching, which will come out at some point too. So all of these things we're kind of looking at the moment, and they're all really important, and we're involved in a lot of different programs and still looking at more.
Yeah, brilliant. It must be quite tricky, like for every travel business, to plan ahead, because obviously it could be that travel suddenly takes off again really quickly, but you need to make sure you've got those networks in place still. So it must be quite a difficult thing to forecast, really. But
yeah, it's anticipation at this point. I mean, it's very hard to look up when you're still falling. Like we have not hit the bottom of this pandemic, so right now it's anyone's best guess, right? So I think we're as good as anyone as at anticipating, but we cater to our business, and we've had a very aggressive brand promise with the 100 kind of community projects that we have, and so it's very important for us to support and be ready for when people want to travel again.
Would you say it's too early to say, Bruce, sort of how you feel things are panning out in terms of a return for tourism? Obviously it depends on each country, and every country has its own foreign office advice and all of that, but I mean, are you seeing any green shoots, as people keep talking about, at least demand, I think, is returning for next year, but it's when we'll actually start being able to fly again is a different matter.
Yeah. I think all of that stuff is irrelevant, to be honest. I mean, I think we're all looking at borders, and we're all looking at borders opening, and us as tour operators looking at when we can kind of start operating in destination. I think our biggest challenge as an industry is just getting people comfortable flying again. Being in close quarters with someone on a flight, those carefree days, I think, are over, where people didn't even think and just booked a flight. I actually flew home quite late in all of this pandemic, when all the pandemic started coming, because I was away on spring break with my family. And I actually took a flight after a lot of the lockdowns and closures happened. And it was such a unique and different experience. Like it was like a battleground on a flight, where people were fighting for their airspace and personal space. And I think it's going to be a while for people, and that's what we have to work on as an industry, getting people to be comfortable again to fly. to fly in, to be in such a small space with a lot of people, and to get to destinations. They're talking about all kinds of things to make that happen, whether it's middle seats, shields, masks, not serving food. There's all kinds of, even in the Middle East, they're testing finger prick kind of tests for coronavirus before you get on flights. So there's so many things that we can do, and hopefully it'll be enough for customers to just feel comfortable to get back on a flight. I think that's our challenge outside of opening borders. I think borders will open much sooner than the return of that comfort level. Because what we need to do is get to a point where people aren't even thinking about it, and you just book a flight and you're carefree about getting on that flight. And I think that's going to need a vaccine or a cure for that to be, for people to fully accept it. We all have kind of friends who are either full blown or borderline germaphobes, and this is going to affect a percentage of the population that are going to need so much confidence to get back on a flight again or get into crowded spaces again with people. Our challenge is and we've made a career of working with very small scale hotels, transportation providers, partners locally, that will have to kind of meet new standards, which we don't know about yet, that are gonna come up just in terms of cleanliness. I don't know if there's going to be certification programs or ideas in which giving people safety, that there's all this talk about the danger of surfaces now, and making sure, things are disinfected between visits, and how that's going to all shake out. But we now have a completely different conversation that we need to have with very small scale family run businesses sometimes that don't have the awareness or don't have the global kind of business acumen that we need as partners now. And so we're going to have different conversations, I think, than everyone else. I mean, as you were saying, like the cruise companies just have to, they're going to have to, deal with their own surfaces and their own kind of companies. And I've seen videos now with all these guys in hazmat suits, like spraying kind of things and planes, and how that's all going to shake out is going to be, is going to give that confidence in that to the consumer to return. But on our challenge is on the smaller scale with dealing with smaller companies, and what are those conversations going to look like? We're starting to have those conversations now, and starting to think of how we can also bring confidence to what we do. We do a lot of trips on public transport, that are crowd. We used to sell that as a feature, being on a crowded bus with local people going to a place as part of a great experience. And we have to rethink all of those things now, and how we're going to substitute that with private transport, and what that's going to look like, and how we're going to give confidence to the consumer. I just wish, all of, the travel agents out there for a speedy recovery through all this, because it's much harder when you're a small scale business. Any of us as businesses can withstand, 60 or 90 days of a disruption. But now that the talk is, 6 months, 8 months, maybe even a year, it's really tough for those businesses. So, we will do anything. We're going to stay aggressive to work to keep your business and your partnership. We've always appreciated all the hard work and support that we received from travel agents, specifically in the UK. And please stay in contact with us. Please stay in touch with us, even during this time. We're still reaching out where we can, and we're here to help. And so when we do come out of this, business returns to full strength, and we will return to being that partner that will work harder than anyone else to keep your business. We're in free fall at the moment, all of us, including yourselves in the industry. And until we land, nobody knows. We're all like playing defense at the moment. We're anticipating the next move to try and stop, this time, and we're all in hibernation, and we're waiting for people to kind of say that they're comfortable to travel again, and we're staying ready.